For years, I convinced myself that the shadows were tricks of my mind, until I met him and he showed me the truth. Welcome to my channel. For more such short stories, don't forget to subscribe. The first time I saw him, he was standing at the edge of the forest, partially hidden by the thick morning mist. His dark, tousled hair clung to his forehead, and his piercing green eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. He wasn't supposed to be there. No one ever went near the woods at the edge of our town. At least, not after dark. The stories were well known. Shadows that whispered your name, footsteps echoing when no one was there, strange figures lurking between the trees. But something about him made me hesitate. Instead of turning and walking away, I stepped closer. "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The boy smirked, stepping forward until he was only a few feet away. "Neither should you." His voice sent shivers down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something deeper, like recognition. His name was Kieran, and he had a habit of appearing when I least expected him. At school, in the library, outside my window in the dead of night. He always had the same knowing smirk, the same haunting gaze, as if he was waiting for me to understand something I wasn't yet ready to accept. Then, strange things started happening. My reflection in the mirror didn't always move when I did. My bedroom light flickered in rhythmic patterns as if someone was trying to communicate with me. I'd wake up gasping for air, the feeling of cold fingers pressing into my wrist as if an unseen force was holding me down. "They're watching you now," Kieran said one night as we sat on the rooftop of my house, staring at the darkened trees beyond the neighborhood. "Because of me." I turned to him, my breath caught in my throat. "Who's watching?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted a hand and pointed toward the forest. "Them." A chill ran down my spine. I had always feared those woods, but with Kieran beside me I felt something else entirely. Curiosity, and maybe something more. "You see them, don't you?" Kieran asked, his voice softer now. I hesitated. The answer had always been there, buried in my mind, but I had never spoken it aloud. "Yes," I finally admitted. "I always have." The more time I spent with Kieran, the more I realized that whatever pulled me toward him wasn't just fascination, it was something deeper. He was like me. He understood the shadows that followed me, the whispers in the night, the figures I had spent my life pretending not to see. With Kieran, I didn't have to pretend. "They come to us because we exist between the living and the dead," he explained one evening as we walked through the abandoned cemetery on the outskirts of town. "They're lost. They need us." "And what if I don't want to help them?" I asked, shoving my hands into my jacket pockets. Kieran stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Then they'll never leave you alone." That night, I helped my first spirit move on. Kieran guided me through it, his voice steady, his presence grounding me when I felt overwhelmed. A young woman, no older than 20, had been lingering near the old train tracks, reliving the moment of her death over and over. With Kieran's help, I spoke to her, calmed her, and helped her cross over. When it was over, I collapsed onto the grass, my entire body trembling. Kieran sat beside me, silent for a long moment before reaching out and taking my hand in his. "You did good," he murmured. I turned to him, our fingers still intertwined. "I wouldn't have been able to do it without you." A small, almost wistful smile touched his lips. "That's the thing, Elliot. You were always meant to do this. You just needed someone to show you how." I squeezed his hand. "Then don't leave." Kieran inhaled sharply as if my words had startled him. But he didn't let go. He took me back home, held me in his arms till I drifted into sleep. For the first time I felt comfortable. Next morning he made me breakfast. I don't know how or when he got close to my mother. I was shocked, but I knew he had his ways. We ate in silence until he grabbed my hands below the counter. I blushed hard. He slowly whispered, "You asked me to stay, now you take responsibility." We came back to my room and he made me sit on his lap. I was shocked by this sudden change. I thought about it. "I don't think I can go back to being without you. So let's be together." Before I could finish nodding, he kissed me deeply, only to leave me breathless. Now that we were officially together, it felt natural to face the supernatural as a team. Our first real case as a couple led us to Ashmore House, a decaying mansion on the outskirts of town, abandoned for decades but still teeming with energy. "They say no one lasts a night here," I murmured as we stood before the looming structure. Kieran chuckled, his fingers grazing mine. "Good thing we aren't just anyone." As we stepped inside, the air thickened, charged with something ancient. Shadows moved in the corners, whispering, watching. At the center of it all was a spirit, a woman in a torn wedding dress, her hollow eyes fixed on us. "She's been waiting," Kieran said softly. Trapped in grief, I swallowed hard. "What do we do?" "We set her free." Guiding her was painful. She resisted, bound to the house by memories of a groom who never came. It took time, patience, and both of us working together, our energies entwined, until she finally faded into the light. The house exhaled as if relieved, its darkness retreating. Exhausted, I turned to Kieran, my body pressing into his. "That was intense!" He smirked. "We're getting better at this." His lips brushed against mine, slow and teasing, his hands firm against my back. The weight of the night melted away as I pulled him closer, losing myself in the warmth of his touch. In that moment, with ghosts behind us and the future uncertain, all that mattered was us. Epilogue. Kieran's POV. I had been waiting for him my entire existence. I didn't know how or why, only that the moment I saw him I recognized him. He was like me, touched by the darkness, belonging nowhere, caught between two worlds. For years I had wandered in the space between life and death, existing but never living. Then I saw him, Elliot, and suddenly, I felt real again. I watched him before I dared to speak to him, not out of malice or obsession, but because I needed to be sure. He was different, special, and when he looked at me, really looked at me, I knew he could see past the mist and shadows, past the fear and the unknown. He could see me. I thought I would have to teach him how to navigate this world, but in the end, he taught me something far greater: how to love, how to belong, how to stay. He was always meant to choose me, and when he did, when he pressed his lips to mine under the moonlight, I knew I had him forever. The others, the ones who lurked in the dark, still watched. They always would. But it didn't matter anymore. Because for the first time in my endless existence, I wasn't alone, and neither was he.